Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Good evening, Thomas.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's Halloween time. Halloween, that means it's October. Halloween, like Christmas, is a month-long celebration now. It just is.
Oh, yeah.
Accept
Absolutely.
it. And I'm okay with it because it's like compensation for Christmas being 50 days long now. Halloween.
It really is.
What are you doing this year? Anything cool?
Oh, God. I
Kid
don't know,
stuff?
man. We have some traditions, but it's very kid oriented, but I like it. We're obviously trick or treating, they're young enough that we go with them, pack a couple beverages into the little wagon.
Sure.
Take them around the neighborhood. And we'll pick some pumpkins every year. We go to Shady Brook Farm, pick some pumpkins.
Oh, Shady Brook Farm. I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah. Spend a day out with the kids, do the pumpkin ride, do the haunted house, the hay maze, the corn maze, all that good stuff.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize we do live in New Jersey, but literally 20 minutes east of us is just farmland. Basically just up and down the middle of the state, and then the Pine Barrens. So there's a lot of that kind of shit, like hay rides and haunted hay rides and pumpkin patches and all that stuff. What'd you used to do when you were a kid? Did you guys have any
for Halloween?
Yeah,
I mean, like we would carve pumpkins, but like when I was a kid, the big fish was just Halloween night, and we would go raid the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We'd make. It's nothing like what it is today. I was talking about this with my wife the other day. Certain towns will let's just do Halloween on Friday.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the 31st, they'll just do it a different night.
Or it's going to be a trunk or treat.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool because if you know which towns are doing it what nights, you can have 3 Halloweens if you're a kid looking for candy.
Okay.
But we would go all over and we would trick or treat till the dead of night, when way past when we were supposed to be doing it, and we would pull in just a metric ton of candy. It was awesome.
Walked for miles, man. Did you guys have to go through the candy inspection when you got home?
For a couple of years, and then it was I'm tired of this. Inspect your own candy.
That's something else weird
enough
to tell kids about too. That there was this period in our childhood when everyone was convinced people were just randomly poisoning and stuffing razor blades.
You might get a razor blade.
Yeah, into Halloween candy. It's like a meme today. It was an urban legend that just took off that never happened. No one ever got razor blades in Halloween candy.
I never got
happened.
a single piece of compromised candy.
No.
I think every now and then something would get crushed, but that was it.
I swear, I think where it came from was when that Tylenol got poisoned. You remember that? Tylenol.
Yeah, I do
Somebody
remember
poisoned random bottles of Tylenol. I forget where and what city, but that's the reason we have fucking seals on everything now.
Yeah.
Because of that. And then everyone got paranoid about everything. I remember my mom, some people would be weird and hand out Rice Krispie treats wrapped in Halloween cellophane and shit like that, right in the trash.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing homemade like that. It was sad, but that's kind of, I don't know, man. That's weird.
Every year.
Go buy some Snickers.
Every year. Yeah, Snickers was the gold standard, but every year there was this one house. This lady would give out a popcorn ball.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing, man. That was terrible.
I hated popcorn balls. That was the lowest form of treat you could get on Halloween was a popcorn ball.
I didn't dislike them, but again, not allowed to eat them. And they were always in that colored cellophane, right? Like orange.
Yeah, it was like orange and black paper.
We had this is gonna really date me, but I'm not this old. My neighborhood's just old. Like 2 blocks down, when I was real little, there was still a corner store there called Smoky's. And he would be open on Halloween night, and you go in and trick or treat. And I swear to God that he would go into the back of this old candy store and find like leftover shit from 1962. And that's what he gave out. Because he'd give out the most old-fashioned, like he had Reese's and shit in the store, but he would give out like Mary Jane's and like Bit of Honey and always Charleston Chew, like the most ancient, disgusting candy. You know, there's something worse than the popcorn ball, and I just thought of it. The little fucking bag of candy corn. Not like the sealed pre-made bag, like the Ziploc bag of candy corn.
It was all stale.
Yeah, and it, like sometimes it would be in like a Halloween Ziploc, so you at least knew they just did it, and sometimes it wouldn't. Again, right in the trash. Right in the trash.
I'm a fan of candy corn too. I like candy corn.
I fucking hate it.
But not that candy corn.
I despise it. It makes me so, just thinking of the taste makes me nauseous. That and like circus peanuts, I can't. Oh, God. No. All right, here's one. You went to a school pretty similar to mine. What'd you do in school for Halloween when you were young? Like grade school.
Oh, man, I'm having trouble remembering. I mean,
did you go to,
yeah, like
you had costumes and shit? You got to wear your costume to school,
yeah,
right?
there was a day. Yeah, there was a day you got to wear a costume, yeah.
We were always
we would
lucky.
make
See,
crafts and stuff.
If you remember, you might not remember this, but you went to a Catholic school. The day after Halloween is All Souls Day, which is a holiday.
A holy day of obligation.
Yes. So you did not go to school the day after Halloween every year. It was a huge perk. It made Halloween that much more awesome because you could come home and as long you were eating candy, so you were going to be all sugared up for a while. So you got to watch movies until you crashed. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. You know, I think we used to have like some lame ass parade thing in school where we just like
we had a costume contest.
Yeah. But hey, it was like a dry run for trick or treating, you know?
Yeah. Work out the kinks with their costume. Because that was a big deal when you were a kid. You had to have a good costume or you get made fun of.
Oh, God, yeah. You had to think about it like for weeks, decide if you were going to be current or classic, you know, weird or scary or funny. Later, there was the sexy option, but not in grade school.
Oh, yeah. We were too young for that.
Sometimes the teachers got weird with it, but just that one who was like in her 20s. I don't know. I always loved Halloween, man. Halloween was,
it was
a great time. Always a great time. So,
one of those like pivotal points of the year for kiddom, you know? It's like that Christmas.
And it's a great, like, it comes at a great time of year, too. Which is why it's such a big celebration. I mean, it's right on the cusp. You know, right before fall starts getting cold and you start really feeling winter and Thanksgiving coming. You know, but it sucks because you're back at school, but it like kind of softens the blow of having to come back to school when you're little. And candy and dress up, man. It's fucking fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. Anyway, the other big part of Halloween, like we said, is movies. There's like a whole genre dedicated to the holiday spirit of Halloween. And I know Halloween means different things to different people, depending on what you're into and what you believe. If you think it's like an evil day, I mean, whatever. I'm sorry, but you don't get to play.
Get over it.
I went to Catholic school, and I did not have any of those kids whose parents like didn't let them participate in Halloween. We had none of those. They were
homeschooled.
Hopefully, yeah. In high school, we had a few people who took it way too seriously and thought they were, you know, Wiccans, and I celebrate Samhain. And so, God, all right.
Sam
man.
Hain.
You're 17, dude. And you saw Halloween 4, and
Yeah,
that doesn't
put
count.
your dagger away.
Yeah, go watch The Craft again. Get away from me. Some people were serious about it, though, but they usually didn't know about it if they were. No, it's a great holiday. It's gotten weird, like you said. It's not what it used to be. But I think whatever kids have lost, adults have kind of benefited from, because there's a lot more adult shit to do on Halloween, I think, now than there used to be. I mean, aside from parties that people have, there's all kinds of shit, man, for grown-ups to do.
You know what
in
I
the cities.
did one year?
What?
For they had zombie paintball for Halloween one year.
Oh, really?
We went to this farm. I think it was Creamy Acres or something, and you got on this specially designed.
That just sounds funny.
Yeah,
Creamy Acres.
I think it was Creamy Acres, man. You get on this like hayride thing pulled by a tractor, but it's decked out with these paintball guns all hooked up to like a central air system, and it shot these glow in the dark paintballs.
Way.
So you would drive by these like set pieces, and the zombies would come out of the trees, and the zombies were just like dudes wearing like, you know, those big padded suits they put the guys
pads.
in to train attack dogs. They're wearing like that stuff, and you just light these dudes up with paintballs. You know,
like the dudes at the carnival that you can shoot, like a shoot the geek kind of thing.
Exactly. They did it. They did it in the hayride form for Halloween.
That's
and it was
a good
awesome.
idea. What do you think that pays to be I'm going to get shot in the nuts 500 times a night with paintball zombie? Because you know that's where like 80% of the people are shooting you. You're right in the crotch.
I nailed some guy square in the balls. I didn't really mean to.
You did.
But they're not really that accurate. But I saw this. It was glow in the dark. I saw this thing go on a rope right for a nut shot, and the guy like doubled over. I was like, "Oh no! I just ruined that dude's night."
That is a tremendous activity. That is fantastic. I love it.
Awesome.
I love it. Well, that leads us to I don't know. What would you like to do for Halloween as a grown-up? Is there anything that, like, I mean, we've been to Halloween parties. I went to a club one year for Halloween. That wasn't that much fun. Is there any, like, what's your ideal Halloween now as a 40-year-old dad? Just...
Oh, geez. Now it's pretty simple. It's take my kids out to trick or treat. Nothing too late, but they're going to bed at a reasonable time, and I still have the back half of my night. So have some friends over, start up a fire in the backyard, maybe put on a slasher movie on a projector.
That's
out back.
right. You have a projector outside. That's cool. Yeah, it's a last hurrah for that too.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Neat.
Drink some. Have a few beverages by the fire and watch something scary.
It sounds all right, man. Yeah, we don't even.
What are you doing this year?
No, I guess I'm going to come hang out with you. We don't do shit.
Yeah,
they don't even. Kids don't trick or treat around here anymore. They didn't really trick or treat around here when I was little. It might have something to do with being like 2 doors down from a strip club on a highway. But I don't know.
Yeah, you're
maybe
not in a prime location.
No, I used to trick or treat the shit out of my neighborhood, but it was a lot of old people when I was little, and it was creepy sometimes, because there were some old people had this thing where they wanted you to come into the house.
Yeah, they did.
Right, and for some reason the candy was like in the kitchen, like they weren't expecting motherfuckers to be coming by all night, but they had their light on, and they'd make you stand there in their weird smelling house and just like be all awkward and shit. That wasn't cool. But I will tell a little horror story here. Down the street from me, this house on the corner, it was this old couple lived there my whole childhood. They're long dead now. The house is a rental. But when I was little, it was this old couple, and one of them had their decrepit mother lived there with them. I don't know whose mother it was, but she old as fuck. One year, my dad took me there trick or treat, We usually didn't go there, right? And I remember it took forever for the lady to come to the door because they had a porch. And I was just hoping they didn't answer, but she did. And they did the whole "you got to come inside" thing. Oh, you're so cute, you little vampire, whatever the fuck I was.
I love your costume.
What are you? And I had to go into the house. And, you know, I didn't know, for years, I didn't have a reference point for this. But when I first saw the show Hoarders, it's the first thing I thought of. Because as we walked to the kitchen, you walked through a very, very narrow hallway of just magazines stacked on both sides, like above my head as a kid. I don't know how tall they actually were because I was little, but
that's freaky.
It seemed like a lot. And I remember it being real dimly lit and a lot of wood paneling. And like I wound my way. I remember getting candy in the kitchen, and then she made me go see her mom, go visit her mom, who was bedridden. Ooh. Right? And she was in this room with all this shit like around her bed. I remember everything. There was like all kinds of stuff, but it was neatly stacked. It wasn't like piles of shit, but it was just so much. And like, it was extremely creepy. And it was like, come closer, I can see you. And I don't even like thinking about it. That kind of fucked up my whole goddamn Halloween because that was like the first thing my dad made me do.
Yeah, that'll put a damper on it.
I remember coming out and being like, we're not going there again. We're not going there again.
That sounds awful.
It wasn't cool. That wasn't all right. I'm not okay with it now. So what are your sisters doing anything for Halloween at the restaurant?
Probably.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's a big night.
That's their
for
night.
Them. Yeah,
that is their night.
If anyone hasn't heard us mention it before, Tom's sisters own and operate a rad restaurant in Philadelphia, PA. Monster Vegan. It's a horror movie themed restaurant, right? I've been there a couple times.
Yes,
but you've been there a lot more.
My horror obsessed sisters have taken their passions for neon lights, 80s music, horror movies, and vegan cuisine and rolled it into one awesome monstrosity called Monster Vegan. That's the name of it.
Man.
Yeah.
It's a cool place.
It's 1229 Spruce Street, and you don't have to be a vegan to go there.
No.
You just have to be hungry. The food is awesome. The drinks are cool, and it's just the coolest like aesthetic. It's just a really neat spot. And, everyone should check it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, even if you're not looking for dinner, they have a rad bar with awesome bartenders and a whole bunch of cool, like, signature drinks. And everything's horror movies, man. The whole place, the decor, the screens are always showing horror movies 24/7 the whole time. And the food it's like gourmet shit. It's like gourmet
outstanding
shit. Yeah, it's stuff... if you didn't know, you wouldn't know it was vegan most of the time.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in the area, check it out. And from what I understand, we have some fans in the kitchen, over
just
there.
a shout out to Ron, the head chef, my brother-in-law, and his whole staff. From what we hear, they listen to the podcast while they're doing prep work in the kitchen, and they are busy, so they have a lot of prep to do, and they work their asses off back there. But they do so listening to the Yipee-Ki-Yay Mr. Falcon podcast. So thank you guys for that, and shout out to everybody in the Monster Vegan Kitchen.
Right on, you guys rock. Thank you for listening, and happy fucking Halloween.
It's moving. It's alive. It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God. Wise man. I'm gonna get out of here.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Aren't you drinking? I never drink. Why?
We're talking about the original shit today. The original films that all horror films owe their existence to in one way or another. The classic Universal horror movies, mostly made in the 30s, some in the 40s, and a very few in the 50s. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Dave.
How the hell are you?
I'm wonderful.
Yeah, it's good. So, I don't know how normal this is for people of our generation, but you and I were both brought up on these ancient movies.
Yeah, they're old, man, at this point. I mean,
So how did this happen for you? How were you exposed to these really movies that were already like 60 years old when we were little?
my parents had them. You know, I think there must have been like a run of them released on VHS, and my dad was a fan, and he bought them, and it was just something that he knew we would find interesting. It was something he liked, and it was something that like he knew he would be into, but he also knew that it wasn't like super objectionable compared to what we could have been watching. And he used to put them on. And, you know, I think the first one that hooked us was The Wolfman. But that was kind of the jumping off point. And then we're like, oh, man, are there more of these? He's like, yeah. I mean, and we got to watch Dracula. We got to watch Frankenstein. And, yeah, and we wound up watching, like, the whole stable.
Neat. I mentioned this in another episode, but my dad got me watching them when I was really young because he taped a lot of them from a horror movie marathon that AMC did. They're just old classic horror movies. And, yeah, I had The Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man Returns, a couple others. And then he did the same thing when they had a marathon of Abbott and Costello movies, too.
Oh, those are great.
When they met all the different Universal horror characters. So that was another bucket. But, yeah, later on, like you said, Universal got into the game of putting these movies that have been vaulted pretty much and were kind of hard to find and hard to get. They released them all remastered for the time, remastered good enough for VHS, in this big series. And they all had kind of similar covers with portions of the original, like poster art, just on different backgrounds. And they were great. And my dad ended up buying me a bunch of my favorite ones, and then some that he hadn't taped that I hadn't seen. I remember getting Werewolf of London, which is one of the older ones.
That's like a deep cut.
It's from 1935. I mean, it's younger than Dracula, but it was really overshadowed by Chaney's Wolfman, which came out in 41. But yeah, it's a deep cut. And then, Dracula's Daughter, and then one of the older Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it was great as a kid to get into that universe. These were movies made in a different time for a very different reason, to get people into theaters and to sort of shock them while adhering to a pretty strict set of rules, so the results were interesting. What was your favorite? Did you have like a favorite? Was it Wolfman?
Yeah, I did have a favorite. It was not the Wolfman. When I was a kid, and I think it still kind of like holds to this day, it's Creature from the Black Lagoon.
All right, that was one of the later ones.
Yeah,
cool.
That came out in 54, I think. But man, I loved it. Like when I got to watch because when you're a kid, you're in those, like you say, those movies were made so long ago. They're for like just a different audience altogether. I think they're for they definitely weren't for kids of that age, but they're also just for like a much different audience in terms of like what you expect to see in a movie. They're a lot slower. than what you might see today. The pace is real, so like everything's a slow burn. Not that they're
Especially
not
the ones in the
entertaining.
30s, especially the one like the original Dracula, the original Frankenstein. They're slow. The
And
original
Mummy.
Invisible Man with Claude Rains. Yeah, the Mummy. They're all very, very, very subtle, very slow.
So then, if you're a kid and you're like, 8 or 9 or however old I was, I don't remember exactly. Then you get to the creature, and like, it just of all of them, I thought he was the coolest looking one, and like, just stuff kind of starts to happen immediately in that movie. It's much closer to like a classic movie setup, where like
You're right. You're right.
you get like this stinger of action in the beginning to set the whole thing up. Like you see those guys in the camp and they get attacked by something and you don't see it, but there's action right off the bat and you're like, oh my God, like immediately you're like, what got those guys? What was it?
Yeah.
And it just, it pulls you in.
You see that set up a lot later in movies. It's the discovery, the teaser, sort of like a cold open, and then there's the gathering of the team, the gathering of the experts, right? And this guy's an expert in this guy's an expert in that, he's the dickhead, this guy's the nice guy, you got a love interest,
You got
right?
the swarthy
guy,
captain.
the swarthy captain, the doctor who's definitely going to die, the dude with the pipe, and the money guy, the head guy, and you get them all together, a couple disposable, victims added to the crew,
Some red shirts.
and then they set off, to the Black Lagoon. Yeah, it's a great setup, and the creature in that, the underwater footage is amazing for
It's
the
incredible.
time. And you see bubbles, but he's not wearing. The guy in the Gillman suit isn't wearing like oxygen tanks. He's not wearing diving gear. Like I think they filmed all those scenes of him swimming, holding his breath.
Yeah.
I didn't question it much as a kid because I thought, oh well, the Gillman's fucking real. That's the only answer. That rubber face just looks rubber for no reason. No, that movie looks great, and it looked great as a kid. It scared the shit out of me, like not in a bad way. I loved that one. I did.
Yeah,
The
and-
sequels are The Revenge of the Creature isn't terrible. That
Yeah.
one's not too bad.
It's okay.
The third one's real bad.
But that story's also familiar too in another way. Like number one, you said the underwater scene, the underwater scenes where she's swimming, the girl, I forget her name, and she has no idea that just below her in this like synchronous movement is the creature just like enamored with her. And
They're like they're like swimming belly to belly and don't even know it.
It's
It's a
beautiful.
great scene. It's a great scene. It's really wonderfully filmed, and choreographed.
And you know what it is? What that story is? It's King Kong.
Yeah. It's every monster takes damsel.
Yeah.
It's Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's yeah.
And for that
it's
reason,
classic.
it felt familiar. It was the most accessible one to me because of like the set, like all those things about the setup, like felt like familiar for the time that I was seeing it.
I remember as a little kid, I liked that the protagonist scientist's name was David. That was cool. And I liked that he wasn't the dickhead. The other guy, the dickhead, the blonde guy. I love their dynamic, and how they work together. But he's always too much of an asshole and ends up getting him killed. And remember they mix up that
That drug.
knockout juice, and in a pressurized breathing tank, and it's just so cool, man. It's like a survival movie almost.
Yeah, they get trapped.
Once they get trapped, and the Gillman traps them. He's smart. It was different.
Fish. He's got
He
it
is
on
a
the
smart
boat.
fish. But
How about you?
like what's my favorite? I have to say the original, the Wolfman.
Oh yeah, that one's
Yeah, I love. It's one of the tighter ones. It's really short, actually, but it wastes no time, and it tells a really. I think it avoids a lot of pitfalls that later werewolf movies fall into by being so short and to the point. And it's really a story about a guy in a fucked up situation being just manipulated by things he can't control. And we all kind of feel like that at one time or another. And there's also a bit of, coming home, what it feels like to come home after being gone for a long time, and what it feels like to be an outsider, and what it feels like to turn into a hairy monster. But as a template for a werewolf movie, it's pretty fucking good. And I love Bela Lugosi in that as Bela the Gypsy.
Oh yeah, that's
I know
right.
we're not supposed to say that anymore, but that was
Cannot
his
tell
fucking
your
cat.
fortune tonight.
He was really good in that. It's a small part, but he made quite a bit of it. And it was just another horror franchise that he touched. The old gypsy woman, again, that's...
All right, what was her name?
Maleva.
The actress. It'll come
I
to
don't
me.
know.
Maria Ospinskaya.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I remember when her name came up on the screen in the credits, I was like, what the hell does that say? And then my mom immediately was like, oh, that's Maria Ospinskaya. I'm like, how the hell do you know that?
I don't know. There's something about the look of it. The werewolf design is great, too. It's, for the day. It's great. The dissolves for the transformation were cool. And I think
they look awesome.
What I think of it is, it's a lot like, sometimes people say Batman is only really as good as the Bruce Wayne version. Lon Chaney Jr. as Lawrence Talbot is amazing. I mean, he's amazing. And he was a really great actor in his prime. Like, if you ever saw him in Mice and Men, the older version with Burgess Meredith, he's incredible in that movie. And that was before he did The Wolfman and before he got kind of typecast. And he was a hell of an actor, but the fact that he couldn't escape his father's shadow, and then he got typecast as a horror actor, it just narrowed what he could do in that day and age in that Hollywood. It's a shame, but we got a lot of cool performances out of him from it. I love him in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh, he's great.
He's amazing. I think that's the last time he played the Wolfman. It's the last time a lot of those actors played their characters. I think that's the last time Lugosi played Dracula. Glenn Strange was Frankenstein's monster at that point. Karloff hadn't done it in a very, very long time. He played it 3 times, I think. Yeah, 3 times. The original Bride, and he was in, I think, The Ghost of Dracula, which was the strong one with Bela Lugosi playing that weird hunchback dude. You remember that?
Yeah. And he's like, he wants his brain to be put into Frankenstein's monster.
Right. The villagers had hanged him for helping Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But it didn't kill him. It left him with a fucked up neck and shit.
Plays that weird flute thing.
Yes, that soothes the Frankenstein monster. And then his goal is to have Frankenstein. He basically sets the monster after all of the town officials who sentenced him to death and kills them one by one. It's a trip of a fucking movie. And
That was a good one.
Lugosi is downright fucking weird and creepy as shit.
Oh, he's
in that.
great.
He's excellent, super underrated. The whole movie's underrated. And it's so weird. Like, you watch all these and they weren't big on continuity. The studios didn't really respect these movies much, even though they made a lot of money. They didn't treat them, I think, the way they treated some of their other films. And also, Hollywood wasn't big on sequels at the time. Like, there was the idea of continuity between movies was a weird thing. Like you said, the early 30s ones, they're still figuring out what movies are. They're still trying to figure out how they're different from stage plays and what to do with them.
So let me get this straight. You want to make a picture that's just like this other picture?
So what you get is a Frankenstein monster who, in one movie, he's blinded, but then in a movie made 2 years later, he can see again, but he can't talk for some reason, even though he figured out how to talk in Bride of Frankenstein. Like, so you run into a lot of that. You run into a lot of improbable surviving. Like, what is it? Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Oh, yeah.
You discover, Larry Talbot discovers that Frankenstein had fallen through the floor of the castle and was frozen.
Yeah.
I think. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and thaws him out, and it's Bela Lugosi playing the monster.
Well, you know what's funny about that? I saw that when I was a kid because I had seen the other ones and I loved it. I'm like, oh my god, are there more of these? And my dad tracked down Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Yeah,
I watched it as a kid. I'm like, this movie rules.
I loved it. Yeah, because it was more Wolfman. I loved it. Yeah,
and especially like that last scene.
The fight.
The fight.
Yeah, the fight's baller. It's a little too short, but it's
he
awesome.
Leaps at him from the top of a wall just as the water gushes through, and like
that looked pretty good.
Kills them both.
As far as stunts from back then went, that looked pretty good.
So then, like you watch it later and you realize like this movie makes no fucking sense, right?
Oh no, there's none. No,
and I don't like it nearly as much as I used to. But it begs the question, and I'll ask you. Is Wolfman still your favorite? Now that you're an adult and you've seen these, God knows how many times, is the Wolfman still your favorite?
Yeah, I think so. Again, because I think Larry Talbot is a very relatable character, and I think that's why I like it so much.
Okay.
And I don't think there's a lot of logic. It's such a simple story. It doesn't have those believability issues. Like, I know you're not going to get immersed in this old black and white movie with these hokey effects and hokey dialogue and whatnot fully, but for me, I feel like it's for those reasons, it's the most solid as far as holding up all these years later. Yeah.
Okay.
And it stands on its own.
Yeah, it does stand on its own. Is there one that you like more now that you're seeing it as an adult than you did when you were a kid?
Oh, okay. I think, Dracula, the original Dracula. I didn't have the patience as a kid to really understand how important it was, especially knowing the more I knew about movies, the more I learned about film history, the more I liked the original Bela Lugosi Dracula, for sure. And I have the patience to enjoy it now. And also comparing it to every other goddamn version of that story that has come since.
Yeah, it's been done to death.
God, there's not many characters that have been put on film as much as Dracula. There's a few, but not many. Not many. You know which one is underrated, too, that I really did like? Son of Frankenstein. That was the one with Basil Rathbone.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one?
That was
I think I've seen that one.
Yeah, that was one of the Karloffs. So I guess he played it 4 times. Yeah. That was a good one. That was one of my favorites. All right, so wait a minute here. I think okay. No, so this is the one with Bela Lugosi. This is the one with this is the one with the furry vest. Son of Frankenstein, when the monster's wearing that furry vest. There's so many. See, I've seen them so many times. They start to mix together. I can't even tell them apart sometimes. But that's the one with the. There's a lot of things in Son of Frankenstein that they made fun of, that Albert Brooks made fun of in. The fuck's it called?
Mel Brooks.
Help
you mean?
me. Yeah, Mel Brooks. There's a lot of things that Mel Brooks spoofed.
Dracula Dead and Loving It?
Yes, and Dracula. No, the Frankenstein one. The one with Gene Wilder.
Young Frankenstein. Yeah.
Young Frankenstein, yeah. A lot of the stuff, like the cop with the fake arm and shit, that's from Son of Frankenstein. A lot of that stuff is from Son of Frankenstein.
I saw Young Frankenstein way before I saw Son of Frankenstein. And, like, Young Frankenstein makes way more sense when you see that movie. Like, the cop,
right?
I was like, why is that cop look so crazy with that? Like, that went right over my head because I hadn't seeing the source material.
I think you can be forgiven for that.
Right. You know what movie I like a lot more now? To your point, like, I love Dracula. The original Dracula, I love that movie. It's like, the only reason it's not my favorite is because just like the pure nostalgia of Creature from the Black Lagoon. But if I wasn't so hooked on that one, I think Dracula might be my favorite for all the reasons that you mentioned. But for all those other same reasons, the Mummy, the original Mummy, I love as an adult. I used to never watch The Mummy as a kid.
Yeah, that one was tough to get through.
It is so slow, you know.
And the monster that it's supposed to have, you never see it, ever.
Yeah, you see it a little
the
bit.
stereotypical mummy wrapped in bandages choking people. You only see it in the very, very beginning.
You get it once, right at the beginning. And then I think, like, for that reason, I was like, yeah, this movie's boring as hell. Like, when you're a kid, you're like, nothing's really happening. But, man, I watched it much later, just to kind of, I was on a kick. I was watching them all around Halloween. And I was like, let me give this one its due in a way that I haven't been able to because of my attention span. And I loved it. I was like, God, I can't believe that, like, I missed this when I was a kid. But, like, you know, there's no way I was going to get through it. But just what the Mummy does in that movie is so, like, gnarly. He's, like, got his little magic pool that he's able to, like, look into and, like, affect people with his, like, mummy powers, and he literally, like, reaches in and, like, telepathically crushes this guy's heart with his hand.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, this is awesome.
It's a much more psychological movie than the others, for sure.
It was
absolutely
great.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you get,
that's very good. That's a good point. That's a good point.
You hear little bits and pieces too, like what's his name? Imhotep, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's the name of the mummy. When Boris Karloff, after he's, like, become human looking, shows up and introduces and is trying to intermingle with the archaeologists, he introduces himself as Ardif Bey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ardif Bey was the name of one of the characters from the Brendan Fraser mummy movie. The guy, one of the guys in the Magi, the ones that are trying to drive people out. The guys all in black.
Well, they use the Imhotep name too.
Imhotep
right?
is the name of the mummy, but you know who I'm talking about, like the guys that are protecting Hamunaptra. He's like, I am Ardif Bey.
Shit. Yeah.
He introduces himself as Ardif Bey, and then, like, they reuse that name, that alias, and then I'm watching that movie and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that's what Boris Karloff called himself when he was just trying to pretend not to be Imhotep. You know, it was just neat to key in on all these details I missed when I was a kid, and to enjoy it in a way that I never thought that I would, because I never gave it its due, because it wasn't as, like, cool as the other ones. But man, that movie's great.
You can't be blamed for not being able to stick with a movie like that when you're a little kid. It's rough. It's rough for adults now, you know. But okay, so I figured out the Lugosi Igor thing. He played that character first in Son of Frankenstein, right? And then he was in the next Frankenstein film, in which the monster was played by Lon Chaney Jr. in Ghost of Frankenstein. And that was the one where he wanted his brain put in the monster.
He plays, like, the Igor character.
Yeah, again, that's where Igor came from. Because, you know, there was no Igor in the original Frankenstein movie. It was Fritz, right. So that didn't come in most of the stuff that you think of as Frankenstein stuff, it was from Son of Frankenstein and on, and including Igor. But that's the one where he gets revenge against all the town officials. That's Ghost of Frankenstein. So I'm glad we cleared that up. And then Frankenstein meets the Wolfman comes after that. That was the next one.
And Lugosi's playing Frankenstein.
Right. And then you get the House movies.
Oh, House of Frankenstein,
House of Dracula. Yeah, and then the last one is Abbott and Costello.
Yeah. That movie rules.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, these were gold. I'll never stop watching them. Maybe that's kind of the appeal of how old they are too, is that they'll never change. Of course, they're always what they are, but we change, and we look at, like you said, certain movies we appreciate more as we get older. You can always appreciate different aspects of it. Like, I like to watch The Invisible Man, even though that's not particularly a great movie.
I
The
was just
special
gonna
effects for
mention
the
that
time were really cool. They were ballsy to try that.
Dude, I had
1933. That's 1933. Dude.
That was 33.
That came out in 33 with Claude Rains, who was nobody then.
I had seen all of them, like except for that one. And then my wife, because she's so wonderful and she knows I'm a nerd for this crap, one year for like my birthday, got me this big box set of all the Blu-rays. It's 8 movies, right? Mm-hmm. It was like this really cool box set. It had Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it had 2 that I had never seen when I was a kid. It had The Invisible Man, and it had The Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Both
I might have the same one.
Both starring Claude Rains. Yeah. And so I watched The Invisible Man because I was like, "Oh, wow. I mean, this movie's been out since 1933, but like it's new to me." And I watched it. I'm like, "This looks good. It holds up, man."
The worst part is the shrieking woman that's also in Frankenstein.
Oh, the
I can't
innkeeper
stand
lady.
her.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't stand her.
Yeah, she's brutal.
Oh lordy. No, it's a classic setup. It pretty much follows the H.G. Wells novel. Pretty close actually. So it's also an early example of a good adaptation from a classic novel.
Yeah. Just the visuals in that movie look amazing. I can't believe they figured out how to do that.
And it's interesting
that long ago.
It's interesting to see how many of these films, because I mean these characters have woven themselves into pop culture, and there's certain aspects of them that people think of when they think of them. And it's so interesting to see how few of those aspects in the originals, and how like we just said, Frankenstein, most of the things people who aren't, super into the movies associate with Frankenstein came from later movies. And Son of Frankenstein and whatnot. So it's just neat to see that. It's neat to see how they evolved and what bits and pieces people remembered. And also you have to realize these films, all of these movies include, and then some that were made in the 50s, they were all part of something called shock theater. And the original shock theater, the first volume of it was a big chunk of this Universal catalog. That basically, it's when people realized that you can show movies on TV for the first time. They realized this, and there was a demand for this. And the rights to these movies were fairly cheap. So Universal sold the television broadcast rights to a big chunk of their catalog, these older horror movies. So a lot of these local cable stations and local TV stations started to show these old horror movies on TV late at night, on the weekends. This is where you got those original late night horror shows, local ones hosted by people like, what they talk about, what Fright Night's based on.
Right.
None of that exists anymore, of course, but and then there was a second volume that included a lot of the Atomic Age horror movies that came later, but also the second like Creature from the Black Lagoon was in that. Pretty much like everything from the late 40s on. So that's how my dad's generation in the 60s growing up, that's how he was exposed to these movies. Not in the theater, because he was born too late for that.
Right.
He was born at 47, so by the time he was old enough to watch movies, these had already been made and been out a long time. But that's how people got to experience these, and experience them over and over too, because they were on TV a lot. And that's just another chapter, and how that was the first reinvigoration of these movies. And then for us, it was these movies all coming out on VHS.
Yeah.
So that we could watch them at our leisure. And and then you just said, look, you got a Blu-ray set of all of these movies, and you can find You can find more of these movies online than you could ever find in a video store today, which is really cool. And they're usually really cheap and accessible. So yeah, these movies have taken on a life of their own, and it's not strange too, because if you look at the history of film, horror movies have been there since the very beginning, along with westerns and romance. They've been there from the first adaptation of Frankenstein was made by fucking Thomas Edison. Because he was one of the few people who knew physically how to make motion pictures.
Right.
So they've been there from the very, very beginning. And just like we said, like some of the first talkies, Dracula was one of the first talkie movies from 1931. You know, the original Phantom of the Opera was from 25. That was a silent movie. The original Hunchback was from 23. So, I mean, it was there through the entire history of movies. Horror movies have been there. People have always wanted to get scared in the movie theater. I mean, Werewolf of London was 35. And it was
I was 35.
Yeah. That's a weird one. You want to talk about weird pacing. That's a weirdly paced movie.
I've never seen that one.
It's a neat one. It's really bizarre for a werewolf movie. It's more of like a scientist meddling with nature movie in the end, with a little bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thrown in, you know?
Okay.
Very, very different from the Wolfman. Very different.
You know what came out around that time? It's not Universal. It's something else, but it is Bela Lugosi. It is White Zombie. You ever seen White Zombie?
Yeah, I have. That's pretty cool.
That's a cool movie. I like that one a lot.
That was part of that hypnotism, Svengali, zombie era of films when all that shit was in vogue. There's another Lugosi movie. It's called Return of the Vampire, where he doesn't officially play Dracula, but he plays a very Dracula-esque character.
Okay.
And it's neat because it was made during the war, during World War II. And the gist of it is you get a cold open where this vampire is killed in his casket, right, in a cemetery. And then many, many years later, in the present, as London is being bombed by the Germans, a bomb hits this graveyard and
opens the casket.
The casket is, upturned and opened, and these dudes who are meddling about in the graveyard pull the stake out of his chest.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And he comes back to life.
What's that one called?
Return of the Vampire.
Return of the Vampire.
Yeah. It should be on the secret server.
Oh, all right. I'll have to look for that one. I love these old black and white horror movies. I love
That's
them.
a fringy one, but it's really good. It's really good. It's a little choppy toward the end, but the setup is worth it. Setup is totally worth it.
I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other like tangential ones that aren't in the main. The Creature Walks Among Us has to be one of the goofiest ones ever. I mean,
the creature wears a shirt.
I swear the logic behind that must have been they didn't have the money to film on any underwater scenes, and they couldn't reuse the footage again because they reused it all for Revenge of the Creature. So they're like, fuck it, let's just make him a big dude walking around on land. We're just going for that. Fuck it all. Yeah, I don't know. Is there any these will always be really special for me.
I mean, I kind of didn't really branch out too much after that initial run. Like I saw the Abbott and Costello one, but like that's because I was also a big Abbott and Costello fan. We had a bunch of those on tape, and then I had seen a bunch of the ancillary stuff. There was Frankenstein and Wolfman, and then there was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and there was so many versions of Frankenstein and all these versions of Dracula.
Yeah, and back then it wasn't super clear what order they came in either.
Right, yeah. You just watched it and you tried to piece together when it took place. But yeah, I didn't really go too crazy looking for more and more content. They became like comfort movies, I don't know if this is weird. I'm sure you do this, but like I have a stable of stuff that I put on, just in background when I'm doing stuff, and like some of them it's just because like in my like background movies for when I'm like working on a guitar or something, I'll put on like Blade Runner or Bloodsport because
Okay.
I don't need to look up at all to know where they're at in the movie. You just know what's happening. They got
Yeah,
they
it's
both
like
got,
listening to a song. Yeah.
yeah, they got a cool soundtrack, and it's almost like putting an album on. But then, for some reason, these Universal monster movies kind of fill the same role, And again, it's not they don't have kick-ass soundtracks or anything, but
That's one of the funny things about them, right? They reuse so much of the music
yes,
over and
they
over
do.
again. They kind of have a unified feel in that way.
I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's like they're pretty quiet compared to what your run of the mill horror movie that would come out today. They're real quiet. They're very chill, and there's bits of in the pacing. There's lots of pauses. There's lots of kind of dead space. But for some reason, I don't know. It's just like comforting in a way.
There's a rhythm to it. There's a cadence that's soothing.
Yeah, exactly. And so they've kind of
dialogue
become background tracking for me doing other stuff and living my life and doing my hobbies and stuff,
And the dialogue and the delivery is so old-fashioned that I don't know, it's almost like a sing-songy quality in a way. It feels like a fantasy. It's like a movie it's literally a movie. It's a piece of another time. And there's so many little things that are just everyday bits and pieces from when the movies were made that are like cool little archaeological nuggets today, just all kinds of little stuff about how the world worked and just the way people thought back then is just wild sometimes. The things that you're supposed to be afraid of, too, every once in a while is kind of crazy. And just watching what people considered scary change through the years, as the war came and ended and then into the atomic age, and how the monsters changed. It's neat. It's a reflection of, I think, how this country felt about a lot of things because, that's where society's fears were concentrated back then. They came out in the cinema, with what they could get away with, and they had to be a little bit clever. They couldn't get away with just gore. They couldn't lean on gore too hard at all. They didn't show anything in these old movies.
Yeah. So. At the same time, though, you look at 1931, Dracula comes out. There's virtually no blood in that movie.
Mm-mm.
Even though it's about a blood-sucking vampire. I think
you don't even see fangs. You don't even. No. Bela Lugosi never even has fangs in that.
You see the guy get cut his finger in the beginning.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's all the blood you get. That being said, that movie objectively is pretty fucked up. When you think about the fact that they allude to the fact that he has these brides, Dracula that is, has these brides that live at the castle. And they go after kids. They'll steal babies and stuff. They murder
the Lady in White, yeah.
They murder a whole boat full of people.
Well, the Lady in White was a phenomenon too, that it was like an urban legend from back in the day. And it was basically that, a woman dressed in white that would go around stealing children. And the movie played that up, and it's sort of in the novel too. But yeah, that's the thing with the baby's pretty creepy. That's always pretty creepy, and that's been a lot of versions of the movie too.
And then you get this stuff with Renfield. When they open the
Dwight Fry,
the cargo
Dwight
hold
Fry.
To the ship.
Yeah.
And you got Renfield down here just doing that
He's great. It's a great crazy face.
Creepy laugh. And then they lock him up and he's trying to capture bugs so he can eat them, and he's begging for a cat to eat. Which is it's gross, man. That movie it's got a lot of weird stuff just in the dialogue. They don't necessarily show it to you, but it's happening on the screen, and if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, gross.
Do you Did you realize that the guy Dwight Fry who plays Renfield, he was Fritz in the original Frankenstein?
I did know that. Yeah.
Yeah. He also had a very small part in Bride of Frankenstein. He was just like one of the villagers. He had a couple lines.
Okay.
It's kind of neat.
I did know that. Yeah, I noticed him he's like one of the in a crowd. Like, someone should go up there and take care of that guy.
Yeah. He definitely has one of those kind of lines. I mean, Castle Frankenstein. Yeah, now I want to watch all of these. This is fucked.
Yeah, dude, I get in the mood. I want to watch every single one of them back to back to back to back to back, and
they're fairly short too. They're fairly short. The Mummy ones I never get into very much.
Yeah,
like the Mummy's Hand and the Mummy's Curse and stuff. They're very formulaic. I think they're the shittiest ones in retrospect.
But that original Mummy's really good. Like way
That's
better
one
than I
wanted-
ever gave it credit for when I was younger.
That's one I wanted to mention. Tangential one that wasn't Universal. It came after. It was in the 50s. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Did you ever see that with Michael Landon, a very young Michael Landon?
I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I think I saw that.
That's, like you see a werewolf like with a Letterman jacket, like that idea of a werewolf. That's
Right.
where that comes from.
Okay.
Which is what Michael Jackson was paying homage to in Thriller. So it's a werewolf movie, but it's also got like a psychiatrist bent to it. Again, very of the times. It's kind of like Rebel Without a Cause, but werewolf. Honestly,
Rebel
it's
without
really what
some
it is.
pause.
Yeah, Rebel Without some paws, man. You're on point, man. You're on point tonight. Check it out. It's actually on
Lisa,
YouTube.
you're tearing me apart.
No, stop. No. I Was a Teenage Werewolf is actually on YouTube. You can watch it for free.
Oh, cool.
My wife and
I'll
I
check that
watched
out.
it. She had never seen it, and she really liked it just because it is a different take on the idea of what a werewolf is. That it's almost like the Hulk in a way. Like a psychiatrist figures out a method. It's almost like hypnotism, a method of bringing out the most aggressive, angry side of a person, and an unintentional consequence is it causes a physical change and werewolfery.
Werewolf.
And it's not a bad looking werewolf either. I mean, it's a drive-in classic. It's a drive-in classic.
Perfect. I'll take it.
Awesome. So what is that? That's the age when your kids hit 7, they get to see the old monster movies.
I don't know. Well, that's going to require some discussion with my significant other. Yeah, I mean, we'll see where they're at the time. But like, I saw them when I was pretty young.
Yeah,
And like,
I think if they can handle Harry Potter, they can handle
they're already Godzilla heads.
Dracula.
So
Yeah.
it's probably not that big a leap to get to like Frankenstein.
Frankenstein and Dracula feel pretty tame, I think. Pretty tame. Though they might not like it when Frankenstein throws that little girl in the lake.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
All right, so real quick, while we're on this, we went through yet another renaissance of these films and these characters in the 90s when they started to remake them for the first time in a long... Instead of trying to make new adaptations, they just said, fuck it, and just remade the originals.
Yeah, man. We got
With
Bram
budgets.
Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, from Francis Ford Coppola.
I
which
like
is-
that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten shit on a bit in the years since, but it was big when it came out, and I still like it. I'll watch that every Halloween season.
How about the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein?
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, yeah. With De Niro as the monster. I like it because it's really the first film adaptation I ever saw. I don't know if it might be the first ever that stuck so closely to the novel.
Oh, with like the way they built the machine and everything, and
Well,
the
not only that, but the
stuff
setup.
in the Arctic.
Yeah, the stuff in the Arctic, the fact that it starts with, a exploration vessel trying to find passage to the North Pole and being on a obsessive quest and the captain meeting Frankenstein, and it's more of a morality tale that way. Like the original Frankenstein trims a lot of the story and makes it very, very simplistic. There's a damsel in distress. Instead, in the novel, he just fucking kills Elizabeth. But they made that all weird for the movie with Helena Bonham Carter coming back. But there is, The Bride of Frankenstein is part of the novel. Like the story of
Right.
The Bride of, right? So they really chopped it up to make the movies and added all kinds of shit. Like that Dr. Pretorius character with the little miniature people, absurd nonsense.
Oh yeah, that was
So
nuts.
fucking strange and weird. No, I like the Branagh one. I think it's a little overacted and a little trying to be too Tim Burton-y every once in a while. But yeah, for that fact alone, the fact that it's so close to the novel, I really do like it.
You know what I have that I have to show you one night when we have lots of time?
What?
It's called Abomination, the Heir of Frankenstein.
I'm not familiar with this. What is this?
It's a board game.
Oh, God.
Dave, dude, you play as you pick a doctor, and the game is set up so that Frankenstein's monster has commissioned you to build him a companion, and you're trying to
Find the parts.
go around and collect body parts to build a bride for Frankenstein, and then the game has a mechanic where a cop, a police inspector is trying to find you. You're in Paris, and a Parisian inspector is trying to shut you down, and you have to kind of collect all your body parts without drawing too much attention. And you can do so by taking cadavers from the local university, or you can straight up kill people. It's nuts.
Yeah, there's nothing I'd rather do than find body parts on a board game.
Well,
That
listen.
sounds wild.
Listen, man, if you're not into that, I also have The Fury of Dracula, where you play as people from the books, Mina Harker. You could play as the Dr. Seward Van Helsing, and you have a giant map of Europe, and someone plays as Dracula, and it's like a hidden movement game, and you're stalking all over Europe, and the players have to try to reveal your location and kill you.
Can you play as Renfield? And if you do so, can you sound like Tom Waits the entire time?
I mean, we could certainly homebrew a set of rules for that.
Master.
I'll practice my master.
That's pretty good. See that? That's not bad, dude. I knew it.
It was in there
That's
somewhere.
not bad.
Yeah, man. You know what? I have both of those. I've never played either of them because no one I know has the patience to try to get through those games.